watching NRA TV with Bill Whittle.
Hey everybody, welcome to Los Angeles. Live from Los Angeles, it's a Hot Mic Show. I'm Bill Whittle, and today's program is entitled, We Don't Like You. We Really Don't Like You. So return with us now to those thrilling days of yesteryear, won't we? Let's go back to the Oscar ceremony of 1985, when Sally Field won for Places in the Heart, I think it was. Let's have a look at what she had to say up there on the Oscar podium.
But I want to say thank you to you. I haven't had an orthodox career, and I've wanted more than anything to have your respect. The first time I didn't feel it, but this time I feel it, and I can't deny the fact that you like me. Right now, you like me.
You know.
Thank you.
Not so much anymore, apparently. Hollywood is having its worst box office in 25 years. 25 years. And I'm sure they're utterly mystified. But 25 years ago, more than that for Sally Fields in 1985. But Hollywood has changed. Hollywood has gone from the place that everybody used to want to watch in the Golden Globes, forget the Golden Globes, the Oscars. It was the television event of the season. You had luminaries like Sally Fields and Robert Duvall and all the rest of them. And now Hollywood is facing the worst summer box office it's had in 25 years, and I'm sure they don't know why. But I can tell you why. So let's go to another award winner, another award for ourselves, another breathlessly emotional, deeply humble thank you from just last year's Golden Globes win with Meryl Streep.
You and all of us in this room really belong to the most vilified segments in American society right now. Think about it. Hollywood, foreigners, and the press.
You like me, you really like me, we're the most vilified people in America right now. And I would like to say on behalf of half of America, if I may be so bold, that Hollywood, you brought this on yourself, and this is exactly the fruit of what you've been reaping for quite a long time now. Reaping of what you've been sowing quite a long time ago. Sorry about the mixed metaphor. How bad is it? Well, John Nolte over at Breitbart, Big Hollywood, said worst box office in 25 years. He says it's down 16% from 2016, just last year, obviously. Now, here's the problem, folks. If you're going to do one of these big Hollywood pictures, they call it a tentpole because it holds up the rest of the Hollywood studios' year. Tentpole production, like a big computer graphics adventure like, I don't know, Spider-Man, The Avengers, that kind of thing, Iron Man, Batman versus Superman. Those films are going to cost about $250 to $350 million each. One of the reasons they cost so much money is because Hollywood's accounting is so corrupt that nobody gets a piece of the back end because there is no back end. The Lord of the Rings movies, all three of them together, made something like $4 billion. And I think they wrote a check to the Tolkien estate for, I don't know, $70,000. So some ridiculous number, because the Tolkien estate, the author of Lord of the Rings, had the inexperience and the sad ignorance to go for a percentage of the net instead of a percentage of the gross. And in Hollywood, there is no net. They cross-collateralize anything. In any other business, these people be in jail. So everybody has to get paid up front. So $250 to $350 million. Now, if you're going to put a movie like that out, that's going to take a lot of promotion. So a pretty decent rule of thumb, works pretty well, is that you're going to have to double your budget in order to get out of the red. So needless to say, for a $250 million movie, you've got to make $500 million in box office in order to get back about where you were, because here in America, obviously, the distributors take a piece. You go to the movie theater, the people that own the theater make most of their money at the concession stand, but needless to say, they get a piece of the ticket prices. Now, some good news for Hollywood is that the international market has really opened up. China is obviously a huge market. And if you look at this, this is really interesting for two reasons. These are the top grossing movies internationally, not in America, international box office gross. These are the top 20. And the Fate of the Furious is number one with $1 billion and so on and so forth. But you can look over on the right there and see where it says number one market. China, China, Japan, China, 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 South Korea, China, 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 United Kingdom, China, United Kingdom, Germany, China, China, United Kingdom, China. Now, I just looked at the top 20 is all I could cover here, but I looked at the top 100. And in the top 100 grossing films internationally, the top market is not the United States, not once. Not once is the United States ever the top market. That's bad. That's really bad, and that's really saying something. Problem with this for Hollywood is that China takes 75% of the movie revenues. So we have the comfort of knowing that whenever we send a movie like Captain America to China, the Chinese government takes $0.75 of the dollar. It takes 75 cents on the dollar. So Captain America is basically paying for Chinese aircraft carriers. It's kind of an interesting way to look at things sometimes. But of the top 100 grossing films, not one has its primary market in the United States of America, and that is very different from how things used to be. So helping us figure all of this out, helping us figure out why these people in Hollywood are starting to really tank and where those eyeballs that used to be watching Hollywood movies are going, it's our friend Mike Knowles from the Mike Knowles Show over on the Daily Wire, coming to us live from, I don't know, a mile and a half away down the street. Good to see you, Mike. How have you been?
About 10 blocks away.
Let's just open our discussion this way, Mike, because you're very big on pop culture. Apparently now, Hollywood has lost some support from the knuckle-dragging, mouth-breathing, ignorant, racist, redneck Nazis who live out in flyover country. It's inexplicable.
You know, Bill, I'm glad you had me on to talk about this topic. It is one of, certainly it's one of our favorites to talk about, being much besieged conservatives in Hollywood. But it is amazing that after 25 years of making movies expressing their disdain for the American movie-going public, and then giving each other golden statues and complaining about that same American movie-going public, that we don't like them as much anymore, and we don't go to see their movies as often. It is certainly the worst box office summer that we've seen yet. But just look at those movies. I loved the Nolte piece talking about Suburbicon, talking about George Clooney's latest, what appears to be future flop. It's getting bad reviews even from the Hollywood types. This tried old trope of the dark underbelly of those awful suburbanites who possibly voted for Trump and are the audience that are supposed to go see these movies. It just seems tired. It seems old hand. And I don't know that I think the technological issues of video on demand might have finally given us an excuse to stop paying attention to these Hollywood dummies.
Yeah, that's right. And we'll come back to those alternative markets a little later on after the break. Mike, do you think that these people who make these decisions, and people like Meryl Streep and Clooney and all the rest of them, do you think they have any idea, genuine, I mean, seriously now, do you think they have any idea why the box office numbers are so bad? Are they blaming it on the weather? Are they blaming it on the market? They don't seem to realize that this is a grave that they've dug for themselves and been digging for 25 years now. 25 years now.
You described it exactly right when you played Meryl Streep's awful speech from last year about how she's a member of the most persecuted minority, how everyone in the room, the celebrities and the foreign people in the press, are so persecuted. And you know actors, I know actors, we've been around these people a lot, and there is a real persecution mindset, because people should remember that these are really weird people. These are really broken people, very troubled people. They were in drama club in high school. They were never dating the cheerleader or the captain of the football team. And there really is, in my experience, and again, I'm speaking anecdotally, but I've got a lot of anecdotes. It's people who cannot relate to the mainstream culture and who have a real chip on their shoulder. And I think it's no coincidence that the moment that we see Hollywood really break its relationship with the American people is when the studios stopped having significant control, when they lost the theaters because of the Supreme Court, and when the lunatics began to run the asylum. So if you give George Clooney, who's a fine enough movie star, he's fun to watch on screen, if you start giving him creative control over projects and giving him directing powers, I think it's no surprise that he's going to say things and push for things that the viewing public has absolutely no interest in seeing.
You know, I really would like to get to that. That's a great point, Mike. We're speaking in generalizations, obviously, but as you say, you have lots of anecdotes. I have lots of generalizations and a lot of information to base those on. Hollywood actors, first of all, there's a difference between being an actor in St. Louis, let's say, and being in Hollywood. Most of the people come to Hollywood to be actors, want to be movie stars. They tend to be very narcissistic people. They're obsessed with their own image. They're obsessed with their own reputation. And they also tend to be people who are not terribly well educated. So what we have is a really toxic combination, in my opinion, of an inferiority complex that needs to be eliminated by making these deep statements about very, very important issues, which they know nothing about. So it's a combination of the vanity and the self-centeredness and the ignorance, and it makes people like Meryl Streep or George Clooney, or just pick one, feel like they have to show everybody in the world that they are very smart and very, very good people because they make millions and millions and millions of dollars, while the extra standing behind them might make $7,500 a day. So it's a lot of guilt out there, I think, Mike. There's no more
some of those
income
extras
inequality
might
than
make
there is on a movie
$100
set.
a day.
That's right. So
Absolutely.
You want to talk about income inequality? It's never bigger than it is on a movie set.
That's absolutely right. And I'm glad you bring up the point of the actor in St. Louis or the guy who's at the regional theater in Connecticut or something, because there is a similarity that both of those people have, the Hollywood celebrity and the actor who's making the lowest equity rate at some theater, is they're both focused on the art of acting. They're focused on characters. They're digging into the inner life of the character, as Stanislavski's system would say. They're creating an inner life, and it's very introspective, and it's highly emotional, and it's focused on the play, or it's focused on the film, or what have you. The emotional intelligence that is required to do that craft, and there are some actors who are very good at it. Meryl Streep, perhaps now is not as good as she once was, but she was an excellent actress. The emotional intelligence that comes from that does not necessarily translate into the practical or philosophical intelligence, and certainly not into any historical or philosophical education that would allow some Hollywood know-nothing to pontificate and belittle his own audience. I always remember during the Bush years, Sean Penn would go and make these grand proclamations. He was always palling around with communist dictators. And for some reason, George W. Bush, who holds degrees from Yale and Harvard and who's worked in these serious positions his entire life, he's an idiot. But Sean Penn, who I think dropped out of a semester or two of college and has played make-believe for his whole life, he's supposed to be the one to whom we look for our intellect and our geopolitical ideas as a country. There is a real hazard in how articulate and beautiful the people in Hollywood can be.
Yeah, that idiot George Bush used to be a supersonic fighter pilot as well, and a single-seat fighter. Let's just get into the weeds just a little bit before we get into where all these eyeballs are going. It looks like even these big tentpole pictures, which have kept Hollywood afloat for the last 10, 15 years, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Batman versus Superman, the Avengers, all of these things, they seem to be fading pretty fast. I mean, you can only make Iron Man 3 or 4, Spider-Man, what's this, the 5th or 6th in the reboot series. There's only 3 Avengers, there's 3 Thors. So these big comic book tentpoles look like they're in trouble. And that's not good for them, Mike. And also, it turns out that franchises, which we used to call sequels, by the way, they're also running out of juice. So bombs this year were Aliens, Transformers, Smurfs, hang on a second, Resident Evil, Underworld. All of these things that had done pretty well through 5 or 6 iterations are starting to really get played out, and people are tired of seeing this same junk.
Just as you say, you can only make 700 million Thor movies. You can't, at a certain point, you have told the story, and it becomes formulaic, artistically speaking. But the shift that we made years ago to market toward the Chinese market or other emerging markets rather than the American domestic market really, I think, signaled the end for these big tentpoles, the big superhero movies. Now it's virtually impossible to go to a movie theater and see a movie that isn't some sequel of a superhero franchise. And this began, I remember, in probably about 10 years ago now, the Superman franchise changed its moniker from Truth, Justice, and the American Way to remove the American way and say all that other stuff. And in part, you might say it's liberal pandering, but in part, it's also pandering to a foreign market, which is where these movies are going to make the majority of their money. So as that happens, you have the quality going down, but it's just naturally going to be less geared toward that American audience. And the shame in all of this is we've lost the movies for adults. That wonderful $25 million, $30 million movie you saw throughout the 90s and the early 2000s, it just doesn't really exist anymore. And so I'm not even a huge fan of superhero movies to begin with. I certainly am not a fan of them anymore because they're all I've been watching for a decade now. But what movie can I go see with my fiance on a Friday night that isn't going to involve Iron Man smashing buildings to bits? It's very hard to find even one.
Or Sean Penn and Matt Damon and George Clooney telling you what a racist Nazi you are. That's your other option. Comedies are tanked too. Mike, Baywatch, Snatched, Rough Night, Ghostbusters, The Boss, all of them not very good. But here's one I want to talk about before we go to the break. I want to talk about Ghostbusters for a second. They did a remake of Ghostbusters 20 years, 30 years after the original. You can see the original guys there in the first Ghostbusters. That first Ghostbusters was an original, very funny, very clever film. Here's the remake from 2016. Now you may notice a difference among the Ghostbusters. And the difference is, I hope you're sitting down, is that the original Ghostbusters were 4 wisecracking guys, and the new Ghostbusters are 4 wisecracking women. And Mike, it just doesn't work. And I'm wondering if you feel, as I feel, that the American people are tired of being told how progressive they have to be by saying, if you don't accept this all-woman Ghostbusters, it's because you're a misogynist, racist, conservative swine.
That's right. If you don't think that men and women are exactly the same and therefore can play exactly the same roles, there's something bigoted about you. I will say the weekend that the new Ghostbusters came out, I sat down on my couch, I pulled up my Amazon account, and I downloaded the original Ghostbusters because it's a tremendous movie. But there's that aspect of it. There's always talk of the all-female Ocean's 11, God help us. Something tells me that Frank Sinatra can't translate into femininity very easily. You hear talk of the potentially female James Bond. That's what Charlize Theron appears to have been auditioning for in her recent movie Atomic Blonde. But there is this grander point, even beyond all the stupid progressive gimmicks that are going into these movies, is that there isn't any originality in them. They are just reboots.
That's it.
Baywatch has been around for a very long time. The Mummy has been around for a long time. Ghostbusters has been around for a long time. In the 1980s, it was wonderfully original. But now, don't we have any original ideas? And as an artistic point, that may be because the movies as an art form have peaked and they're dying. And there are plenty of reasons that are technological and artistic, but they may have simply just entered into an irrevocable decline. Sad to say.
No, that's exactly right. People want new ideas, and Hollywood's not giving them any new ideas. And when we come back after the break, we're going to talk about where some of those viewers have gone, where many of them have gone. And as Mike Knowles said, what is actually replacing movies as we know movies today. We'll be back in just a few minutes. I'm Bill Whittle. This is the Hot Mike Show on NRA TV.
It's hard to believe, but this year marks the 6th season of The Noir Show. I've had a hell of a good time trying to put together the best take on gun culture I possibly can. And one of the best parts has been interacting with you, the fans. One thing you've said from the very beginning is we want more noir. Well, me too. So this year, I'm doing things a little different. We aren't gonna wait until the fall to give you finished, polished, shiny new episodes. Nope. This year, we're gonna release content while we're still in production. So some of these videos are gonna make it into the final episodes this fall, others are only gonna be standalone. Either way, my goal is to give you exactly what you want. More noir. So look forward to all sorts of new content from The Noir Show for the rest of the year. And I hope you enjoy.
I mean, if you were to Google him, you know, all of these things come up. It's Rich Froning. He's a Reebok athlete. He's the 4-time fittest man on earth. He's the 2-time affiliate cup champion. But if you're from Cookeville, you just know Rich is a good guy.
I can't speak more highly of Rich Froning, just simply because of his heart, of his humanity for people who are hurting.
That kind of love and support that you see in his heart and life, it just rubs off on you as just being around him.
4 years ago, we had our first Rich Froning's Mayhem for Mustard Seed, and this year we had our 4th event that raised over $200,000 towards the kids at Mustard Seed Ranch.
And we're back with the Hot Mike Show live from Los Angeles. I'm Bill Whittle with our guest today, Mike Knowles from The Mike Knowles Show over on the Daily Wire. And we've been talking about Hollywood's worst box office in 25 years and all of the harping that they do and all of the insulting that they do of the vast number of American people who used to go to movies and don't go to them anymore. Just before the break, Mike was talking about the fact that movies may have actually peaked and are on their way out as a form of entertainment, and there's some pretty good evidence that he's right about this. Let me show you a picture here of somebody that you probably don't know. That is a guy named, his screen name is PewDiePie. He's a Swede, and he has the largest YouTube channel. He has 57 million subscribers. 57 million. If we look at the YouTube numbers, you can see that they're just unbelievable. Some of these numbers here, number of subscribers on the right, 57 million, 32 million, 31 million, 25 million. Now let's get that into just a little bit of perspective, shall we? The top ranked TV shows, this is what they would see on a general basis if we have those up there. Okay, so you can see like the end of MASH was 128 million, but by the time you get down to the bottom, these are the top shows that ever aired. 47, 48 million. He has more subscribers than that. And finally, just to give you a little close, the most watched event on TV ever was the moon landing back in 1969 on July 20th. 530 million people watched the moon landing. 530 million people. It's like 16% of the population of the Earth. That was the biggest TV event ever. 530 million. There's a guy on YouTube named Luis Fonsi. He has a video called Despacio, which has been seen 3.58 billion times. Billion times. 7-8 times what the moon landing did. So something's going on, Mike. People are leaving TV and they're going to YouTube. What is it about YouTube that they like?
It, I think, explains in part why Hollywood has lost its glamour. It's the same reason why we're now going to YouTube. It's funny you bring up PewDiePie. I was just looking at him about 2 hours ago. The man could run for president. I suppose he can't because he's a Swede, but he has so many people at his fingertips. And even when you talk about those old shows that used to get so much market share, I Love Lucy, the great sitcoms, that has not been the case since Seinfeld. Since the 1990s, early 2000s, that massive common culture has dissipated. In part, it's because there are video-on-demand services now, so people don't just watch the networks or the 1,000 cable channels. They'll watch Netflix or Hulu or Amazon or iTunes or what have you. Or even more frequently, they'll go to YouTube and they'll find their guys that they like and they will follow them. And the reason that we follow somebody like PewDiePie is that we know everything about his life. We watch him playing video games. The biggest episodes on his channel are him making jokes about video games and playing video games. It seems totally uninteresting, perhaps, to us, but people love that personal connection, that Instagram culture.
That's it.
Feeling that I know what Kim Kardashian is like when she's eating her lunch, or what kind of sandwich she likes. And that has two sides. On the one hand, we immediately go to this personal relationship with them. But because it's so unglamorous now, we know that people like David Harbour, who gave that awful speech when he won for Stranger Things, screeching political speech, Meryl Streep, George Clooney, we know that they're just as flawed, and in many ways much more flawed and disgusting, as we, your average Joe American. And so it really breaks that glamour that we used to expect from the silver screen.
That's terrific stuff, ladies and gentlemen. Mike Knowles is, you can watch him on the Mike Knowles Show over at the Daily Wire, along with some other friends of ours over there. Mike, it's great to have you with us. I really appreciate that insight, and we look forward to seeing you again real soon.
Thanks for having me, Bill. Always good to talk to you.
You too, pal. There's one final thing to close on here that is probably the worst news for Hollywood of all, and it's very subtle. Something that I struggled with, and I still continue to struggle with, to be honest with you. I fight this tooth and nail. It just offends me. But it's the reality of the world now, so I just have to accept it. And that's very simply this. I've been doing political videos on YouTube for, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years. 50 million views, somebody counted once. That's a pretty decent number over the course of my career. And the thing I cannot come to grips with is the reality of what the audience is looking for now. Mike touched on it just a second ago. The reality is, the more produced a show looks, the lower the numbers are. The less produced the show looks, the bigger the numbers are. Probably all of the stuff I do with graphics and green screen and bringing in videos and all these transitions, probably my numbers would be much, much higher if I just held up a camera and talked into it and just did it as a selfie. Now, Mike touched on the reason for that, and it's a simple reason, and that is affinity. People feel like they know these YouTube stars. People feel like they know them, and the more produced that show is, the further away they are from that experience. Our friend Mike Rowe, who did a terrific job on Deadliest Catch and Dirty Jobs, he just has a podcast now. He just puts his camera on his dining room table and talks to it in the morning over a cup of coffee. Does huge numbers. So affinity is the thing. People like the people that they like, and that means Hollywood's in big trouble. And I'm probably in some trouble myself. That'll do it for the Hot Mike Show today here on NRA TV. I'm Bill Whittle. We'll see you back again tomorrow.